Hi, I'm Dave. Welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about this new Scalextric Rover SD1. Here it is, the Scalextric Rover SD1 with the Steve Soper 1983 touring car livery on it. Now, when the new release announcement came out for the autumn release of Scalextric slot cars 2024, Marcus asked me if any of them caught my eye, and this car did. Not just because it's a big, glorious, bright yellow slot car, but because this car is very significant in British touring car history, and Steve Soper, the guy that drove it, is also another one of those very significant drivers that probably most people around the world haven't heard of. A bit like when I did the video about Rod Burley and his car, I thought this car, regardless of how it runs or anything, is an ideal car to do a great video on, where I can do a bit of that history of the driver and history of the car. And there's going to be quite a lot of that. So let's make a start, shall we? Let's start with driver Steve Soper. Steve Soper is, although you've probably never heard of him if you're in North America, somewhat of a saloon car driving legend, especially in the UK. Although he competed in touring cars all around the world, Italy, Asia Pacific. He did win the Japanese Touring Car Championship in 1995. He also did some sports car driving, winning the 24 Hour of Nürburgring in 1987 and the 24 Hour of Spa in 92 and 95, among other all sorts of notable achievements. But he is mostly known for his career in British touring cars, which spanned from 1982, when he first entered the series driving an Austin Metro 1.3 litre touring car, and he managed to finish third in class in that first year. Tom Walkinshaw of obviously TWR kind of noticed him because he turned up with a bit of a splash and signed him up for 1983. That team then ran 3 of these Rover Vitesses in the 1983 season, a season in Steve Soper's career that I'll come back to when we talk about that car. He did, however, continue in British touring cars all the way through the 80s, driving MG Metro Turbos, the Ford Sierra RS 500, and then he moved on to BMW 3 Series, the M3s and the 318i S's. He continued in British touring car until the second half of the 1990s, when he took a break for a while to do the sports car racing, returning for one final British touring car season in 2001 with a Peugeot 405. In 2005, Soper was ranked as the greatest touring car driver ever by a panel of motorsport experts for Motorsport magazine, a very illustrious publication. And despite such a great career, and despite being described as the greatest touring car driver ever, in 2024, Autosport magazine, another long-running publication, ranked him as the greatest British touring car driver to have never won the title. Now, there's a caveat there, which we'll get to next when we talk about this car. This car is one of 3 identically prepared cars, prepared by TWR, Tom Walkinshaw, as effectively the Rover factory team for the 1983 British Saloon Car Championship, now known as the British Touring Car Championship. The cars were dominant. There were 11 rounds in the season. Steve Soper won 5 rounds, Pete Lovett won 4 rounds, and Jeff Allen won 2 rounds. So they won all the rounds between them throughout the whole season. As a result of this, Steve Soper finished top and won the British Saloon Car Championship in 1983. Pete Lovett was second. Andy Rouse, in a different car altogether, was third, and Jeff Allen was 4th in the points. And that was it. However, rival racing team owner Frank Sittner had apparently had some kind of an argument or a spat with Tom Walkinshaw the year before, a falling out, and lodged a protest against TWR. There were a number of wranglings backwards and forwards, counter protests, all sorts of things. It took a very long time to get an adjudication on these protests. So long, in fact, we were halfway through the 1984 season when the entire TWR team was disqualified from the 1983 season, and Andy Rouse was then declared 1983 British Touring Car Champion. This disgusted Rover so much they pulled the entire team out of the 1984 championship with immediate effect and moved to the European Touring Car Championship in full force, citing scrutineering inconsistencies as their reason for leaving. Now, they might have a point, because all three of these cars contested all 11 rounds and they all apparently passed scrutineering every single time. And yet, 6 months into the 1984 season, somebody decided the rear wheel arches were too big and that they'd used non-homologated rockers in the engine. And that is why they got disqualified. So there was huge controversy. It surrounded this particular car, and Rover did not return for nearly 20 years to the Touring Car Championship. So, as I say, this is a very significant car. So significant, in fact, that the mechanic that built it originally for TWR managed to track it down in the early 2000s and has then subsequently managed to buy it and completely restore it, and even took it racing in 2017, which is why, and we've been through this before, I think it's quite a good thing to do, because it's a car that's been more recently restored when photography has got colour that's at least vaguely like reality. So it's fairly easy for a slot car manufacturer to make a reproduction of this car. So let's look at the reproduction of this car. I think overall Scalextric have done a pretty good job here. The colours are all pretty much bang on, and as far as I can see across the whole car, all the liveries are correct and in the right places. But as I've said before, this is the advantage of making a slot car of a restored historic car. You get better pictures to work from, and you can probably go and look at it if you know where it is. So yes, the benefits of all of that sort of thing have definitely paid off with this car. Fit and finish wise, well, quite a lot of the car is decals. So, you know, the shininess of the paint is always compromised a little bit by decals. You can see quite a strong evident line along the roof, the front edge of the roof, where that decal goes across, all the way across the front of the car. The bonnet, I mean, there's a little bit of, I mean, if it was paint, you'd call it orange peel, but it's not. It's the texture of the decal. Other than that, though, I think it's very good. There's lots of nice little features, like they've managed to put an arrow for the towing eye on the rear bumper. They haven't put a towing eye under the rear bumper, which is a bit of a shame, but I see they're making good efforts there. And the other thing that I'm slightly critical of, I suppose, is the headlights, because the headlights have got these really, really good Austin Rover transfers across the front of the headlights, exactly as they were on the original car. But because Scalextric haven't put any sort of silver paint on the yellow body, you can't really see them. I need to sort of take the headlights off, I think, paint a bit of silver paint in there behind those, put it back on, and then you'll see those Austin Rover logos properly in those headlights. So that's the top side. Let's take it to the bench and look underneath. Okay, fairly standard and quite featureless one-piece Scalextric chassis. Nice little touch with the Rover badge in the bottom there. They did that with the Ford, and I think they're doing that more and more these days. It's a nice touch, even though most people aren't going to see it. DPR ready, big old magnet in there. I'm never that impressed with Scalextric guides, but at least it's not one of those horrible big, deep, round protrusions that they put on some of them. That's all right. The wheels have got quite nice detail on them. You know, it's a kind of the one-piece lug nut in the middle. Oh, that's not so good though. I think that front axle is a bit dry. Now that might be a thing at the moment because Aid Slot Car Shed, he was having trouble on one of his live streams with a new Jag, and that had a dry front axle and made that sort of noise. So a little bit of oil on there, that will sort that out. Oh, hang on a minute. Let's go and have a look at this.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you an emergency coffee and chat.
Hello friends. So, emergency coffee and a chat. In my last coffee and a chat, I talked about expectation, and I recorded that video on Sunday afternoon. Sunday night, quite late, I found a fault with this car. So I emailed Marcus at Scalextric, and my expectation was I'd get quite a prompt response. And I did. I had a response by lunchtime on Monday. My expectation was they'd offered to replace it, and they did. My expectation was I would get some kind of a corporate standard response as to why. And I didn't. I got honesty. This is the first one of these that somebody has reported a wonky wheel on. However, this seems to be happening randomly and occasionally, and they're looking into it. Now, I admire their tenacity on this because they're looking for an intermittent fault. It happened on this car and it didn't happen on the next one or the one after. Those things are usually quite tricky to track down. The other thing with expectation is you could kind of go, oh well, blah blah blah, and say all the things people say about Scalextric, possibly rightly, possibly wrongly, and you'd be wrong in this instance because this is one of however many thousand cars that have been made, and this one's wrong. But the others aren't. It's not like complaining about a car where they've got the colour completely wrong, or there's a fault and it's a fault with everything across the range. That would be terrible. But if your expectation is that if somebody makes 1,000 of something, they're all 1,000 of them going to be perfect, your expectation is wrong. So from the point of view of expectation in this car, I expected all four wheels to be in a straight line. They weren't. Everything after that has met my expectations or exceeded it. Can't really fault that, even though it's a fault. Good chat. Let's see if we can fix this. Okay, let's see if we can find out what the problem is with this back wheel. In fact, both of these back wheels. One's very bad and one's a little bit buckled. As usual, the interior is a bit rattly. That's pretty much every slot car going, so I will put a bit of foil tape on there, as I usually do, just to quieten the body down a bit. In here, well, I'll pop the back axle off and I'll have a look, but first let's have a look at this front axle. It is completely dry, so pop a little bit of oil on there. That's much better. The back, however, could prove tricky. Let's take this axle out and have a look. So yes, that axle seems to be straight, but that wheel is pressed on and has gone on at an odd angle, which is why it is incredibly buckled. So I'm going to have to pop that off there, and I'll see if I can straighten it up and put it back on. And if I can, I'll do that, and then I'll run the car as it was intended to be run. Magnet, proper wheels, everything. If I can't, then I've got another idea to possibly put a different axle or different wheels on this axle, and we'll just get on with modifying it. We'll see how we go. So I'll have a go at that, and then I'll come back and it'll either have these wheels on it or it'll have different wheels on it. As you can see, there's a selection of bits here, including an NSR Fiat Abarth. So I had a look at this, and this wheel, when it's been pushed on in manufacture, it's gone in at an angle and it's kind of ruined the hole that's in the middle of the wheel there. Now, I probably could go through a whole rigmarole of filling in all of that hole with some filler and then putting it in a pillar drill and drilling it out and getting it all straight and then putting it back on this axle. But I don't know whether it's going to achieve... I mean, it will straighten the wheel up, but ultimately it's still just an original Scalextric wheel, and it's not probably going to go back on perfectly straight anyway. So I think I've kind of ditched that idea for the time being. Might try and do something about it later, but for the purposes of this video, let's just get on and make the car so it can be run on the track. Which is why I've come to the NSR Fiat Abarth, because actually these wheels are pretty much the same size. And we know that an NSR wheel is a nice machined metal, perfectly round wheel, and so on. Now, of course, I can't just put these on this axle because this axle has the Scalextric knurling on it, and the wheel won't go on, and I'll damage the inside of the wheel if I try and put it on there. And again, I could try messing about with these knurls to sort it out so that the axle is capable of taking this wheel without damaging it. But I might as well just use another axle. Now, I could use the axle from the NSR Abarth, but I kind of plan on doing this, and if it works, I'll get some more of these wheels and put them on here. And I'd like to put this car back to running properly, so I'm not going to use this axle. But what I have got is some axle pieces from the Pioneer Legend that I customised, and I didn't use these wheels or axles that came with it. So I've got these here, and this axle, of course, with these bushings, is all the correct size and does fit these wheels quite nicely. However, it's a little bit too long. So I'm going to have to probably cut about 5mm, maybe a little bit more, off the end of this axle with a Dremel to make it the right width to take these wheels. And I'm going to try and get, just for ease, I could put different gearing in it, but for the time being, I'm going to try and get this gear off this axle and fix it to this axle and put it all back together. So we've got all the scaly running gear apart from the back axle and the wheels. And then I'll put it on a track, and then we'll see how it runs. I'm sure it'll run great. So back in a bit when I've messed around and done all of that. So as you will have seen just there, I cut the end off the Legends axle to make it the right length, and then I ended up cutting the end knurling piece off this Scalextric axle. Of note was how much quicker the Dremel went through this axle than it went through this axle. This axle is considerably harder metal than this. But cut the end off and got the crown gear and the bushings off of that axle, put them on here, fed them through. Now at the moment we're in a situation where the crown gear is fitted, but it's not fixed to the axle. But for the purposes of checking it's all going to work before I commit to it, I have put the wheels on and fitted it all up, and it's fair to say these wheels fit really quite nicely. I mean, I would say if you were going to upgrade your Rover SD1, I'd probably do this upgrade anyway. You're going to end up with some nice hard axles with properly round, balanced, machined wheels. You'll be able to put the NSR tyres on it. I might even just get another set and do front and back. If I'm keeping this car as a tuned up hot rod, which I guess I am, then yeah, we might as well go for that. So all I've got to do now really, now that I know everything works, is fix this gear to this axle. Now I've got the crown gear in place on the new axle. In the end, I was thinking about, should I try and find somewhere to drill a hole and put a grub screw in and all the rest of that? And I thought, no, I just need to do something simple that you guys could do to fix something like that. So I marked where it should be on the axle, scuffed the axle up ever so slightly with a little file, just so that some thin CA glue could hold it in place. And to be honest with you, it's great. It's not going anywhere. It's a very low-tech engineering solution. It's kind of a fairly low-tech hobby at this level, isn't it? So that all matched. So other than that, I have to say, I don't need to try and glue this motor down, because this motor on this car is really solid. So everything else is working there. I've put the Scalextric tyres back on the NSR wheels for the moment, just to give it, I suppose I've had to change the wheels, but beyond that, it's as realistic as it can be, as I can make it, by just replacing some wheels and an axle and keeping the rest of it as Scalextric as I can, just so I can stick it on the track with a magnet in standard trim, and give it a bit of a run, see what it does. I expect it to just handle like it's on, you know, rails. I mean, it is, literally. We'll see how we go. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention about this car, Scalextric have been very good here. These don't fall out. And these don't fall out. So you haven't got to hold 10 different wobbly bits in place to put the body shell on. You can just put the body shell on, not worry about it, it's all going to line up. This is a lot better than, I mean, that 105E was quite tricky. You had to get it in all sorts of funny angles and hold the lights and all sorts. This one, cracked it. Excellent. So I'll pop the screws in there and we'll take it to the track. So then let's put this on here and give it a few laps and have a chat about this car. So this is with the magnet in. Now, one thing to note here is that, okay, I've put different rear wheels on it, but with a bit of oil in it, and the fact that the Scalextric motor is actually fixed down properly, this car is really quite smooth sounding, and there's no horrible gear noise or anything. It's really quite nice, quite refined, really. Obviously the model itself I'm very enthusiastic about. I think that is absolutely spot on. It's really good. It's a shame about that fault with the wheel, but it is an isolated incident and I'm sure you won't have that problem, and if you do, I'm sure they will replace it for you, no problem, no questions asked. So I think this Rover SD1 is a success on all levels. Now this video has probably gone on far too long for a review video by now, so I'm going to save the taking the magnet out, putting weight in and customising it up for another video, and I might, as I say, get 4 NSR wheels and, you know, really throw the kitchen sink at it, because it's a really nice car, and you know, it's bright yellow and it's big. So if you've got kids, even if they don't know the history of the car, it doesn't matter. It's a big bright yellow slot car. What is not to like? I could do this all day. Oops. As always, thanks for watching one of my videos. If you liked it, you'll find a button specifically for that. Please subscribe to the channel, it's free and it does help. If you press the bell, you'll get a notification the next time I post a video. And check out this slot car channel.